Welcome to Love and Other Investments, where we talk about finances, but more importantly, how finances impact relationships. My name is John, and I'm a financial planner.
And my name is Jeff, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is Love and Other Investments. And today, we're kind of pondering an idea of what would happen, and I'm sure it's never happened in the history of the world, that two people in a relationship who have jobs that they both feel are important and are helping sustain the family find themselves in a situation where due to a move, due to maybe going back to school, maybe a job change, maybe a desire to open a business or whatever, the family finds itself having to decide which job has priority. Jeff, could this cause some stress in a marriage?
Right, like none of us know the answer to that already. Of course it does.
And I don't think it's really all that uncommon anymore. I mean, if you think back in the 1950s, the nuclear family, back when Technicolor was just coming around, before everybody lived in black and white, there was typically one wage earner and one caregiver.
So if the wage earner got a promotion that required moving to another city, they just moved to another city.
Yeah, that's just kind of how it was going to go. Maybe there was, some thought of, but I really, this is where our family is, or these are where all of our friends are, and so I guess
this is where school is.
Yeah, so I guess maybe you've got to find a new job if you don't take the promotion, right?
Yeah.
But now we live in a different society with some different cultural pressure. People are considered much more egalitarian and equal in the relationships. And this creates this 50-50 buy-in, which is more common now. And that actually now creates some challenges.
So I can imagine some of our listeners might be thinking, well, the simple solution to this kind of dilemma is whoever makes the more money, that's the one that you have to stick with.
I'm going to bet that is predominantly felt by those who make the most money in their careers.
The other one might protest, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right.
What if you love your job and it's important and you're serving people and it's what gives you your value and it's who your identity
your
is.
Purpose in life.
You went to school for this before you met your person, and now you're doing your thing, and I've got to give this all up because their W-2 is bigger?
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, I think there are plenty of people actually in my profession who are in situations like that where you feel as it's like a calling, and it's not about the money. You do the work because you want to make the world better, not because you're trying to get rich.
And you feel like your spouse, who may have the larger income, is facilitating you being able to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And now they're saying, hey, I've got this opportunity and I kind of need to move, and so
right.
you need to adapt.
Right. How do you do that?
So I can imagine this kind of becoming a stalemate. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you would be a fan of saying that stalemates can be hard on marriages.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, not just a stalemate too, but also the reenactment of a patterned way of interacting that's maybe not so helpful. We've talked about this idea before that a lot of arguments in a relationship have a kind of loose script. Mm-hmm. And if one person says one thing, then the other person says, the common reply, and back and forth and so on. And if you ask someone, either person in the relationship, if they could complete the argument, complete the other person's side of the argument, if you just ask them, they would be able to do it. So in a sense, it's kind of memorized, right? These arguments,
right.
The pattern is there, and it's kind of memorized by both sides, and each person plays their part in that script. So
even if the object of the argument changes,
yeah, right,
which is really interesting to think about, is we know how to have the same argument over 9 different topics.
Exactly.
We have a pattern.
Right.
Okay, you tell me what you want and what I want. Okay, we know how to argue about this.
Yeah, and ultimately, the vast majority of those don't end well. It doesn't end in resolution.
Right.
To whatever the conflict is. So I think to the extent that a situation like this triggers that kind of a script. People go down a path that's perhaps familiar and uncomfortable and then get stuck at some spot. Maybe that's the moment to be raising your hand and saying, hey, I think we need to go to therapy. Mm-hmm. Not everyone wants to go to therapy or necessarily needs to go to therapy, but for some folks who get pretty stuck, it's maybe a good idea to have an outside party look at that situation.
I want to throw an idea out. We've said this a bazillion times, that there's a lot of resources in your family. It's not just money, right? When most people go, hey, what kind of resources do you have available to you? You pull up your app and check your checking account, right?
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. Lots of resources. But I'm kind of thinking one of the resources that unfortunately we play with too much in relationships is the resource of power.
Mm-hmm.
Because it kind of seems like how much power I have in the relationship is a dangerous resource to play with.
When power is used against your partner, mm-hmm. as a club against your partner, there's a problem. If you're having arguments, we're talking about a specific argument right now, like, some opportunity perhaps or some dilemma that you're having to navigate around, say a new job or starting a new business or mm-hmm. going back to school or something like that. When power is used as a club to solve that kind of problem, nobody wins. Everyone gets beat up. Mm-hmm. So, you have to be thinking about how to use that power in the service of the relationship.
I was kind of talking earlier about the old nuclear family. And, we kind of would, I think, casually agree that in the old days that, the husband was in charge. We don't need to go nuts with that. But
yeah.
And now we would want to believe that we're in a situation where, for the most part, couples are in a 50-50 situation. There's more equality in how we address these challenges. And so when we get to these stalemates, I could see somebody saying, wait a minute, this isn't 50-50. Somebody's going to have to win. Somebody's going to have to lose. That means this is the end of life as I know it.
Yeah, one person, you're saying in this situation, one person would be declared to be more important than the other one. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the other one has to take their role as less important.
So I want to talk through this.
Yeah. I think that's a real and painful dilemma for a lot of couples, that they have in their mindset that their relationship is essentially a struggle for power. I'm not talking about everyone, right? I'm just, certain people. And in that struggle for power, the idea is that your partner is your adversary, mm-hmm. right? They become sort of an enemy to you. And of course, we can implicitly understand this is deeply problematic, right? If you're attempting to have closeness and connection and emotional intimacy and have fun and togetherness in a relationship, you don't want to be having an overt or even a powerful covert process of undermining the other person. That's completely contrary to the purpose of mm-hmm. relationship. And eventually it kind of tears at the whole thing.
We want to believe we're pulling on the same rope.
And that's the idea, right? Mm-hmm. So from my vantage point, I'll go back to our sort of classic central idea here, mm-hmm. which is that, if you're to be cooperating as a team in a relationship, if the couple is to be moving forward in their life together, both individuals in that couple have to favor the couple itself over everything else. This, on its surface, sounds like a radical idea because it sort of, I can hear people almost thinking, oh yeah, but I don't want to give up what I want, mm-hmm. right? I just got this big promotion and I want to move to Michigan or wherever it is. You know what I mean? Like,
Do people want to move to Michigan?
I don't know. Do they?
I don't know.
I don't know. So anyway, the idea is that they don't want to give up something. But you and I have a separate idea from this one, in which we suggest that working as a team to find some common values, things that are more important than money.
Yeah, we've talked about this idea that, the thing that we, kind of commonly hear is in both of our practices, I don't feel like we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And we've said that there's really 3 pages.
Yes.
There's your page, there's my page, and then there's our page,
Right.
If we're in a relationship.
Right.
And I think couples are pretty good at understanding what's on their own individual page. They lived long enough prior to getting together to have some hopes and dreams and expectations. And,
Ambitions.
Ambitions, absolutely. And so here we are now saying that there's this thing of whose job is going to be most important. And how can you not want to look at your own page and go, here are all the reasons on this page why this is so important to me?
Yeah.
And if you haven't already invested the time and the energy to co-create a joint page, this isn't just taking my page and your page and stapling them together.
Right.
Because there's still 2 pages there. There's still conflict.
Right.
But the idea is to say that while our 2 individual pages are important, and I value what's on your page and you value what's on mine, we've decided for our future to create something bigger than the contents of either of these pages individually.
Yes. Bigger than either of us individually.
Yeah, there's no way that I could accomplish the things by myself that are on this page. And there's no way that you could. We would have to do this together. And in creating that idea of what we want to advance towards, what we want to look back 20, 30, 50 years from now and say, look what we were able to accomplish together as a couple and as a family, those things, when these individual page conflicts start coming around, have to serve the main objective. Now, you had mentioned before we started, we did the recording,
right,
that you've actually had a little bit of personal experience here.
I have. Actually, a very significant decision needed to be made when my wife and I were not long after we were married. So we were in our mid-20s. She was finishing up a program, a PhD program, and the last part of that, other than the dissertation, it was a requirement to do an internship. Mm-hmm. And she applied all over the country to do an internship, and she got one at Harvard, one of the Harvard hospitals. We lived in LA at that time. I grew up in LA. My family was in LA. My job was in LA. That's really, that's all I knew, mm-hmm. right, is living in Pasadena.
And you're both at this position in your career where you're both trying to advance your individual careers.
That's right.
And it's kind of crunch time.
Yeah. And you have, the way the system worked back then, you had to make the decision on the day that you received the call. So literally,
wow.
So she applied to 14 different places, and however many were going to offer you the job, you would literally have to say right then on the phone. They'd call you like all over the country. Everyone got this call, right? All interns were getting calls from wherever they applied.
It doesn't sound like a therapist put this program.
No, it's changed since then, but it was pretty horrible, right? It was like really this is a horrible situation. So you have to so we had to have this discussion, like, what are we going to do here? If you get your top choice, which was the one she got, mm-hmm. What are we going to do? And it was a difficult conversation, mm-hmm. because it required sacrifice, big sacrifice. For me, changing jobs, she was literally still finishing school. I mean, mm-hmm. this internship was very low pay.
Right.
And so for me to give up my job to do an internship was going to plunge us into some financial stress.
Yep.
Which it did. And you can't plan for it because you don't know which one you're going to get until the day the call comes. You literally don't know where you're going to be moving until the day of the call.
This sounds like a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah. So at that point in our relationship, she and I didn't have this thing that you and I are advocating now, where we're having our eye on the ball, right? Where we have a set of common values and we're pushing forward to create something that's better for the relationship.
Can you imagine, first of all, I know you can imagine the stress and the relationship capital that cost.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Can you imagine how different that whole moment could have been if in that moment you could have both looked at each other and said, does this phone call and saying yes to it advance our cause as a family and the things that we hold most important?
Yeah.
Would that have simplified things?
I do think it would have. And in the end, I think we effectively did that, but with a lot of pain, a lot of argument, a lot of like, oh, this is tough. What do we really do? But in the end, I think both of us understood this opportunity for her was once in a lifetime.
Right.
Like, you're just not going to get another opportunity like this, and you sort of have to do it.
So let's not make a mistake here. Let's not say, well, it worked out fine anyway, so you didn't really need to have any goals or objectives. I don't want to run over the fact that you said something really important, that was really painful and really hard, and probably was a little bit painful for more than 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were months leading up to this where this discussion had to be had over and over, and the planning of it had to be considered because it did mean literally moving across country. So, and changing jobs and not knowing where that would be. So, yeah, it was a big deal. And I do think it would have been a lot simpler if she and I had had our current, sort of shared values in place. I think we would. I think we would have made the same decision, but we would have come to it with less suffering. As you mentioned, it worked out. But I could see, and I actually know people where it didn't work out.
Right.
And, either that caused a year-long separation or the end of a marriage or just, the beginning of problematic times.
You think of regret.
Yeah.
I wish things would have worked out differently. You think of holding the grudge. I can't believe I said yes to this. All of those things that people carry with them.
Yeah.
That can create some long-term stress versus being able to a certain degree, let it go and go, the decision that we made together, although it's going to cause one of us to have to say goodbye to something, it's still smaller than the thing that we're saying yes to.
Right. And if you don't have in your head, there's something bigger in play here.
To celebrate.
And to work towards.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a real sense of loss as you make that move. But there's also a sense of celebration of look what we're doing together.
Yeah, to create a better future.
And the person who is getting the thing, making the move, versus the person who's not.
Yeah.
They in that situation really understand the sacrifice that's being made.
Right.
Of saying, hey, I am putting us first. And those types of moments are real. They are unavoidable in a real family over a number of years.
Yeah.
And they can be the things that strengthen you, or they can be the things that cause you to fray.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as I mentioned, it would have been infinitely better if we had the values we have now, that we've created now together, our common values, of which one of them is education, to help us make the decision. In fact, I know now, if an opportunity had come up at this point in our lives, based on our on our value of education, it would be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that there wouldn't be, sadness or a sense of loss or, fear related to a change like that. But I think there would be a sort of peace about, we're doing this for a bigger purpose.
So I want to go back to kind of where we started, which is the power struggle.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in these struggles over a thing, a decision, a direction, and you find yourself realizing that this is a moment where you either get or lose power. And I think people are more defensive when they feel like they're losing power, right?
Right.
It's a really good indicator that you haven't decided together with your spouse what's important and what you really want.
Yeah. I think if you have the presence of mind to think of that power struggle as a cue,
Mm-hmm.
like an indicator to tell you, hey, we need to work on something else. There's something else going on right here besides this power struggle we're trying to work out. We need to figure out how it is that we can become a team so a power struggle is just gone. It's just not necessary.
And we're going to say the same thing every time, which is, I think it's going to be building that third page, building that common core values that you define together, that you create your language around, that you measure how you use your resources towards, that you are both in alignment with. That is where you find your success to measure, how are we doing and what moves us forward as a family.
Totally agree.
Absolutely good stuff, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for listening. Please leave us a review and follow us so you don't miss an episode. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit relational-media.com.